Well, hey, Life Group Leaders, once again, we want to welcome you to your weekly Life Group Leader training video. This week, we're super excited. We are beginning a series in the Gospel of Matthew, starting with Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 to 17. So, if you haven't had a chance to spend some time in that passage with the Lord, then please stop this video, go read that passage, go spend some time with the Lord, and then return to this video and get ready to lead your group. But this week, as stated, our passage is Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 to 17. And what we find, the Gospel of Matthew is an ancient biography. And ancient biographies, they seek to paint a picture of their main character. They want to present that person as fully and clearly as possible to their audience. And so what Matthew is seeking to do in the Gospel of Matthew is paint a picture of who Jesus is and present that picture to his audience. Now, something to know about ancient biographies is that almost all ancient biographies begin with a genealogy. It was commonplace, if not expected, for you to begin your ancient biography by telling the audience who the ancestors and descendants of your main character are. And for Jesus, he never has descendants, so Matthew here gives us his ancestors. This was what every ancient biography did. And so when we read this story, we should not be surprised that Matthew begins the Gospel of Matthew, an ancient biography, with a genealogy. What is surprising, however, is what Matthew chooses to say about Jesus with his genealogy. And so for this, I just want you to imagine that you are a Jewish person reading this book. You're a Jewish person hearing this genealogy be read to you, and you've spent your whole life longing for and waiting for the coming Messiah, the person who would come and rule and be the long-awaited king, the person who would show us what it meant to be the people of God, the son of David, the son of Abraham. This is who you've been waiting for. And you grew up hearing all the stories of the Old Testament, the stories of Perez and Judah and Jacob and Isaac and Abraham and all of these incredible stories, the stories of David, the stories of Solomon, all of these stories you grew up hearing. And as you grew up hearing these stories, you were told that these stories were not the end of the story, that the end of the story, the culmination of the story, would be the Messiah coming, that we were waiting for the King. And then you get this book. And this book, this message that this book proclaims from the beginning, is that Jesus is the son of David, that Jesus is the son of Abraham, that Jesus is that long-awaited King. And as Matthew reads out all of his ancestors, all of these people whose names are associated with stories that you know, the stories of Ruth and Rahab, the stories of David, the stories of Joseph, all of these stories that you know, as you hear their names, you begin to realize that all of these stories have been pointing to Jesus, culminating in Jesus. So Matthew makes his point clear with a very cleverly written genealogy that Jesus is the culmination of history. But what he also makes clear is that Jesus is not what we would expect of him. In a typical genealogy, you're trying to keep that line pure. You want to present your main character, especially if your main character is a Jewish man, you want to present him as a pure Jew, that there is no Gentile in his genealogy. And even further, at this time, you would never mention women in a genealogy. It would do nothing to speak to the honor and value of the man that you were speaking of in this time and in this culture. But Matthew includes not just women, but he includes Gentile women. He includes characters like Rahab, who we know to be a Gentile, who we know to be a prostitute. He includes characters like Ruth, who we know to be a Moabite. He includes characters like Bathsheba, who was involved in the story that we know of with David and Bathsheba. And so Matthew, he doesn't seem to be concerned about the purity of Jesus' line. No, rather, he wants to communicate something else. He wants to communicate that not only is Jesus the long-awaited king, not only is he everything that the people need, but he's also nothing that they expect. That he is going to subvert everything that they expect of him to be. And as you read the story of Matthew, you will find that to be true, because they believed that the Messiah was coming to conquer, defeat the Romans, elevate Israel as the one dominant power. And yet, Jesus comes and he's conquered by the Romans. Jesus' war that he was waging was not with the Romans, but with the greatest enemy of all, sin and death. He subverts their expectations. And so not only is he everything they need, but he's nothing that they expect. And I think that's true for our community as well. That as our community comes to meet Jesus and find out who Jesus is, that he's going to be everything that they've been looking for, but he's also going to be nothing that they expect. I think that's true for us. And so this week, we want you to challenge your group with that main idea, that Jesus is everything we need, but nothing we expect. And we want you to encourage them to go looking for that. And so we don't only want you to emphasize that main idea, but challenge them to spend time each day reading the Gospel of Matthew. We want them to read at least through Matthew chapter 5 this week, and to record instances where Jesus surprises them, where Jesus says things that they don't expect him to say. We believe that Jesus is always surprising and subverting our expectations. And then we want them to take one step further. We believe that just like Matthew writes a gospel to tell others the story of Jesus, the surprising story of Jesus, that we're called to do the same. And so after they have that experience and they see a story where Jesus surprises them, we want them to do what Matthew did and tell that story. Why? Because Jesus is everything we need, and he's nothing we expect. And so that's our main idea. That's our challenge for the week. We hope you have a great time. We are praying for you, and we will see you soon.